Hello everybody, and this is your Christmas special. Now today we are going to look at a fantastic collection of cars owned by my friend Rob, who is the previous owner of Project Ruby, and this Maestro is one of them. This Maestro is absolutely identical to the Maestro my granddad owned when I was a little kid. This is full of nostalgia for me, and he's just bought this, and there's a load of peachy cars to look at within his collection. Absolutely astonishing collection. Let's go and have a look, take a drive in this. Smell the 80s of British Leyland or Austin Rover. And as you can guess, it's an automatic, a 1990 LX automatic, of which there are only about 3 of these left in the entire country. In fact, there's about 200 Maestros left altogether, Austins and the Rover. Badge, technically Rover Maestros, but they weren't really badged as anything. This is again a Rover Maestro LX Auto as registered, but then it was the days where they got rid of the Austin name. But I've always wanted to drive one of these since I was a kid. I remember sitting as a child in that seat, and I've got not but good memories, nothing but good memories about this car, I tell you. My granddad got rid of his, I believe it was a G-Reg, exactly like this, in burgundy, 2-tone. So this car is a carbon copy, apart from the automatic gearbox, of my granddad's car. And I think in the world of classic cars, nostalgia is pretty damn powerful, and for me it's even more powerful. I feel such a privilege to have got my hands on one of these to actually drive, albeit that it's the automatic version. I'm sure most people prefer the manual version, I should say. That 3-speed ZF winding down the gears very subtly. It's very smooth. 3-speed automatic gearbox in, well, 1990. How archaic is that? By 1990 this car was a little bit archaic, to be fair. It wasn't a competitive car, it was sold on the basis of the poverty side of Austin Rover. Well, it was an Austin Rover by 1990. The Montego, Maestro and, well, the Metro was refurbished into the Rover Metro, but the Maestro and Montego were due to die pretty much. They were not due to be renewed. They were due to be replaced, but they were just left as the poverty models for the older disconcerting buyer, the traditional Austin customer or the Rover customer that couldn't afford a Rover. But if you bought one of these and you liked it, apparently you could go on and buy a Rover in some circumstance. But this versus a Rover R8 is like chalk and cheese. It's two different things. We've got a 1.6 S series engine. Go on. Gearbox takes a bit of time to spool up. It just bellows down the road, and I can see people looking at this car in, what the heck is that still doing on the roads? Oh, this is sumptuous. This really takes me back. Yeah, 1.6 S series, which unfortunately in my granddad's example, which is why he scrapped the damn thing, is because the crank seal started to leak repulsively. And he visited my parents at the weekend, and all I remember as a kid is leaving a puddle of oil. He scrapped the blasted thing and bought a Corsa B, of all things. That was a good car actually. I won't knock the Corsa B. That's another car that actually I've got a little bit of a soft spot for. Maestros are always good to handle. This is one owner from new practically. The second owner only had it for a very short amount of time. It's an undiscovered gem. It's not been discovered by the Austin Maestro Montego Owners Club, which is a very small club. The survival numbers of them cars is very, very small. And for that reason, really, many cars are pretty much known within the community. This isn't. This is an undiscovered gem, but now it isn't because it's on YouTube, and I'm just privileged to actually drive this thing. Rob has handed me the keys because he knows that this is a car quite special to me in my past, and it's the car that I poked and pointed and asked my granddad, what's this, what's that under the bonnet? And that's the way you get into cars, isn't it? That's the way I got into cars, asking questions and being, well, curious. The handling is really nice, and I tell you what, it's actually really tight. I can feel that torsion beam rear suspension working very nicely to keep the back end nice and downtrodden as such. And obviously we've got McPherson struts at the front, very conventional, not hydrogas, as previous cars, i.e. the Allegro that it replaced. But this being a later one, we get the soft dash, the smoother dash, and this one hasn't cracked at all. This has been in the garage most of its life, which is why it's not cracked. Everything works, apart from the central locking. It wants to work stupidly on a few doors, but we'll gloss over that. Go for a kick down. Second, third. Right, that's it. We've run out of juice. Fantastic. Takes a while for this car to get going. There was a lot of gummy fuel in this car when Rob first acquired it a few months ago. It was running really, really poorly, but now it seems to run quite nicely. Oh. It's also worth noting that this model does not come with power steering. Some models got it, this model did not get it. And I can tell you something, after owning a P6, I think this categorises as an absolute tank to drive. I think Montegos are even practically worse. Oh, Jesus. I tell you what, people in the 80s, they didn't need to go to the gym, they just took the car for a drive. Whoa. Suspension is so comfortable. I'm actually really surprised at how well they made this ride and handle. This feels tight as a drum. Right, let's go to the lockup of dreams as far as Rob is concerned. His car collection is vast, and he just buys cars. He buys a car, sells a car, and then buys another one. And Ruby, well, when I bought Ruby off him, didn't have Ruby for very long, he bought this car. How crazy is that? If you haven't noticed, ahead of us we have a Mark 1 Focus in tonic blue, a Flight no less. That is Rob's current Focus. He has a Mark 1 Focus that he's acquired. He's had a few of them down the years, and I'm just following him to the lockup. I don't know why, but when I bought my Mark 1 Focus, there was a lot of comparisons I made to the Maestro, and I'm not sure where the comparisons are, but they're just two very good family hatchbacks. This was the same, yet they rusted, but these rust as well. And this is in decent condition, I'll tell you. He bought it for decent money, low mileage, 1.6. You don't feel as if you're ever out of control in a Maestro. Everything is very, very well planted. I love this car. I absolutely love this car straight away. I get the impression on the door mirrors. I love the door mirrors, so 80s, very pointy. Unfortunately, I would like to say that no other car had this design, but I think they were copied by Protons. Yeah, sadly. But I love the door mirrors, very, very in keeping with the 80s. I think that's the best comment I have about the interior. No, the fabrics are really good. The interior is so well put together. These seats are so comfy. Anyway, we are here, and let's go and see what there is to see in Rob's collection. Oof. Right, that is a wicked drive and a long time coming, and I'm glad that I fulfilled a childhood dream by driving one of these. And I know that some people are going to laugh at that, but these are incredibly rare cars. They were everywhere back in the day, and they've just disappeared over the last 20 years, most of them because of rust. This is no exception. I think there's some scabby areas here and there, but it's actually relatively solid, really solid from a Maestro, and we'll look at that in a second. But I just want to go over that Rob's collection is one of these people that, as I say, he buys one car like that. He's just driven past me. He buys one car and then he sells it again, and then he buys another one because there's a gap in the fleet, and then he sees a good one, and then he goes up to, let's say, 11 cars, and then he sells that, and then he has to buy the 11th car again, and then he adds a 12th one, and then you can't ever go down and decrease the fleet. You have to go up. And car collecting is addictive if you have the finances and if you have the space. More importantly, space. I think most of us would actually do this if we had that sort of space. Rob can do so. He keeps his cars in several different places. In fact, he loses track over where the cars are, the keys. The only thing he is really, really good at is the paperwork and the tax. Obviously, back in the day, things were a little bit hush-hush. You could get away with probably having an untaxed car on the public road and no one would notice if you could get away with it. But these days, ANPR cameras, and there's all sorts of checks. You can't get away with stuff these days. And I've come here today to look at his amazing collection, and the Maestro is just one of them. And the Maestro was a result of actually selling Ruby to me. He sold Ruby to me, and then he bought the Maestro with the same money immediately. That's what car collecting can be like, and it's addictive. And I thought it'd be a really good place to start for a Christmas special. Now, I've come down here, we're in Kent, I've come down here in Beatrix, and we had a few issues down on the way, just little niggles. So I'm just going to lead off to Andrew at the services yesterday morning.
Yeah, and you join Andrew at the services in Canterbury, and we've had some electrical issues on this journey, and some very, very weird ones. Now, firstly, it doesn't take away that this car has worked absolutely seamlessly on this drive down here. Seamlessly. It has been the most relaxed drive using this gearbox you could possibly imagine. I couldn't have done this in the Focus. in the same time frame, I should say. But it hasn't been without its issues. Firstly, this morning, that was roughly where my fuel gauge was. I've probably used, I reckon I've done about 50 to the gallon, truth be told. But I filled this tank up to the brim where the fuel pump at the petrol station cut out. Now, at this stage, the needle was pointing to the top pointer. And I thought, okay, that's great. So we've got a little pointer. I could actually do an MPG calculation on that. And I'm driving down the motorway, and we've already done 50 miles on the trip, and it hasn't moved. Oh dear. So what's going on there? I stopped at a services on the M1, and my only conclusion is the fuel float probably hasn't been that high in many years, maybe never. So the arm, I reckon, got stuck. And I had this theory that if I go to the back of the car and smack the bottom of the tank a few times, it might just knock the arm and just release it. And thank God that worked. It totally worked. No problems whatsoever. So it has now started to drop. And as you can see, it has gone to the correct level. The fuel gauges in these Rovers are utterly appalling. It takes them 5 minutes to sort of settle where the actual fuel level is. The second problem I've been having is some weird issues around the center console. This radio keeps coming on and off when it's actually switched off. I'm not sure why. Something to do with this being plugged into the cigarette light. I mean, I can show you probably now. It's not even turning on. No, now it doesn't want to turn on at all. Yeah, this might have been causing a few issues, but I don't know. That's been turning on by itself. The clock has sort of, I think it's been operating when this was plugged in, so it might be something to do with this. And then secondly, the SRS light came on. Just forgive me, I've got the boot open. Now if I just start it, oh, it's gone off. There you go, it's gone off. So the SRS light came on about 30 miles ago, and I've just stopped at this services and I've just wiggled the connector and it's gone off again. Oh, honestly, you know, I've had quite a few things. This mirror started rattling itself, so I just moved it and then it shut up. So we've had a few things not work. And then, as I took the key out the ignition, I went to go for the unlock button, because obviously with the auto unlocking, if you unlock it and then lock it manually again, you've overridden the auto locking, so it won't auto lock when you take the key out the ignition. So I have to lock it, and as you can hear, it works. But it didn't a few minutes ago. It didn't want to open the doors for me. I was a bit worried there that I couldn't get out the car. For whatever reason, it refused to unlock. I've never had that happen before. So, and don't start saying about the Petron, you know, not being funny, the SRS light is nothing to do with the Petron system. So, I don't know, it's working now. I just don't understand what was going on. Oh, grief. It's a bit noisy out here because it is, we've got lots of trucks going on. But, absolutely fantastic. And I can absolutely say no brake fluid has been lost whatsoever with this car. So, I'm really pleased about that. And we've probably killed a few things along the way, but actually it's pretty clean at the front. I did polish this. I don't know what the heck is this. We did come through some rain, but she's looking amazing. I did clean the wheels, and as you can see, we're getting brake dust again, but that's usual. It means the brakes are working. I'm really pleased, and the new discs are bedding in really nicely over the last couple of months now. But I want to point you out to this, because this is utterly hilarious over here. The future is definitely electric. I mean, literally, like, that's broken. Is that working? Is that gonna work? I don't know. Supercharger. Well, it's obviously not in action, but it looks like it's ready for action, but the others are being covered up for some reason. That one's trying to uncover itself up, and so is that one down there. I think they're trying to get working, but they're not. The rest are covered up. Yeah, this is the future of electric cars, guys. Oh, there's a couple more that have just partially uncover themselves, but they don't know if they want to work or not. That's absolutely fine.
In 50 yards, turn left.
Yeah, I'm going to turn left as the sat-nav says, but I'm going to get going. I just thought I'd show you that. Absolutely hilarious. Yeah. So we had a few different niggles with Beatrix, but we got here absolutely seamlessly. And I'm so pleased because all the work I've done on Beatrix has kind of compiled in this one journey, of the longest journey I've done in Beatrix. And it was a test to see that all the work I'd done actually worked and there were no issues. The truth is, those were little niggles. The SRS like was really random. There were some really random things going on with that car, but it's old cars for you. Things do go on, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'll keep an eye on and monitor it. But now, Rob's Focus will start here. Now, I know people are going to laugh when I said earlier that when I bought my Focus Mark 1, I remembered instantly the really nice days of my childhood with this car. Why? They're totally unrelated cars, aren't they? I mean, they both have McPherson struts at the front, but what do they both have? Well, they're both 5 doors with a hatch. They're both hatchbacks, but they're family hatchbacks. So that's the first thing I thought about. This was a family car. My granddad drove my family everywhere because back in them days, my mum didn't drive, my dad didn't drive. Well, my dad still doesn't drive, but the point is my granddad was ferrying us around everywhere, and I feel that I got some of that back when I bought this car. And they're completely unrelated cars, but in some ways they're not. They're two of the most relatable and recognisable family hatchbacks in the UK. So that's where the comparison really ends there. But this is Rob's 1.6 Focus Flight, as you can see, with these really distinctive wheel trims. They are, I believe, 15-inch, and the gears, the early pre-facelift gears, would have had the exact same trims, but maybe in 14-inch style. That's the only difference. But the Flight was based on the LX. The Edge, which was the other run-out model, was also based on the Z-Tech. So there were 2 run-out models. You could still get an LX and Z-Tech and gear, but most of these were sold quite in high numbers, but predominantly it is an LX. In fact, I'll just unlock it, which it is unlocked, and we get into the car, and it's just ever predictable, that Focus Mark 1 smell that every single one of them have, and it feels like home to me. It is my home. This is the smell of just reliability, comfort, and dependability. He's had an aftermarket radio put in, but he has got the original radio. I have told him you can put the original radio in with an FM adapter, as I've shown you in a previous video. The gear knob, as you can see, is not worn at all, which kind of denotes the actual mileage of this car, which I believe, if I just put the key in, set the steering lock off. There, one doesn't want to play ball now. There you go. 68,000 miles. That's nothing. We have the LED lights in the cluster because obviously this is the latest one. Obviously, it's being an LX, based on an LX, we have the black dials with the orange pointers, as you'd have got. The Edge models would have had the grey Z-Tech card at the back with red pointers. That's as simple as it gets. Very nice indeed, and barely worn on the back seats as usual. I'm not a massive fan of the material, but at the same time, actually, I think this looks a bit neater than the Harlequin trim that you get on Z-Techs. But overall, very, very nice. No leaks, I can say. It was torrential rain yesterday when I came down. No leaks in the passenger well. This is a one well-sorted car indeed, and there is no massive differences. However, we are missing a little adjuster for the backlighting on the cluster, and that's just because you can't adjust
the actual LED bulbs in this cluster, they are just one particular brightness. Whereas with the bulb clusters, with the actual bulbs pre-2003, you would have had a little adjuster for the light. That's it. He bought this car for around £1,700. It was up for £2,000, which was possibly a lot on the steep side. But remember, you know, down south, it's a little bit more than maybe if you live up north. The prices in Birmingham are absolutely ridiculous. So I would definitely say this is in line with what I would expect to pay in Birmingham for that sort of mileage. And if we just take a look at the usual rot spots, that's pretty tidy, I've got to be honest. It's starting to go, but I can confirm that there's no rot behind the arches. It's only surface rust, so it probably needs treating before it gets worse. Eventually it will probably go, but at this stage it's nowhere near needing to be sorted, which kind of goes to my point. And I've seen many of these late 05 examples like this. They don't tend to suffer from as much rot, the later ones. That's not because they're younger. They're only a couple of years younger. This is only 3 years younger than my own example. But they generally, they don't really suffer from as much rust. They obviously got the galvanising and the rust protection correct on the late models. Possibly because the Mark II had come out and they didn't want to be putting customers off who may want a late Mark I and wanted to continue the sort of high reputation that they hoped for the Mark II, because obviously the launch of a new car, they want new customers to buy into the new car, but the old one is the run-out model, so we have to make sure that that model is going out with the same levels of quality, which is why I think the middle range cars, the cars in the middle of a production period, tend to be the worst ones for rust. In my case, 2002, 2003 tends to be the year that Focus Mark 1s really do suffer, and I do believe 2002, 2003 models will be very rare in the future. So this is a really tidy example. The paintwork is absolutely astonishingly nice. It's just as clean in the engine bay with the 1.6 Sigma engine. Nothing particularly special. As I say, being the LX, we do not have fog lights, but it's lived most of its life down here, and it just starts on the button. How predictable is that? So I'll leave that there. But anyway, I'm going to concentrate on the Maestro next. Whew. Well, now I may go into a bit more detail with this car, because how many times does a YouTuber get to actually review an Austin Maestro? Not many times, because there's not many of them left, which is really sad. But I always remember the Maestro being quite, not a radical car, but something that looked quite different to anything else on the roads. And I think, just like the Allegro, I think you could kind of aim the dumpy looks. I think a lot of people will say there is a bit of a dumpy look, dumpy duck sort of look to a Maestro, which is kind of unfair, because I think it was a very good replacement for the Allegro, which was just compromised in every area really going. In terms of its looks as well, but in terms of the suspension, really good. But the Maestro had to be a little bit cheaper and a little bit more conventional without hydrogas. So McPherson struts at the front, and obviously a torsion beam rear at the back. And on driving it, I'm pretty impressed. I didn't know what to expect, but what I did expect was a comfortable ride. And I can't believe how well engineered this car actually is. There are people that used to literally spit when they see a Maestro, because it's an absolute other car. I don't understand what those people are on, whether they're on cannabis or something, because there's nothing wrong with a Maestro. It's a very, very good car. It was never an excellent car. It was just a good car, a good family car. The problem is, because they were made of such poor steel in the early days, Romanian steel probably for one, Maestros, Montegos and Metros just disintegrated. There's not much left of them. This one being an LX, now there is some things that people may have noticed that is wrong with this car. For a start, yes, the tailgate has been completely resprayed, and it's a very good paint job. In fact, if I show you this, yes, it's in this burgundy colour. I can't remember the name of this colour. It's a very, very nice colour, and my granddad's example was a two-tone as well in this burgundy. The only bodywork damage is a slight bit of a dent on that door there, which is annoying, very annoying, but it's very, very solid apart from, you know, that, and maybe a tiny bit of filler work because there is a bit of fiberglass here, but it's, as you can see where the paint's gone, there's been a bit of welding on one of the corners, but apart from that, as you can see, it's just so solid. I'd never known Maestros to crack a spring. They're very good on the suspension, Maestros. If I show you the underside, someone loved this car. I mean, Rob's just put a new old stock genuine exhaust because the non-genuine ones can kind of bend a little bit. This comes straight out. This is a genuine exhaust. Most Maestros do not have a genuine exhaust on them these days, and they don't look particularly right. But underneath, it's just completely wax oiled. It's just so free from rust, it's untrue. It really is a peach of a find, and as I said before, this car is not known in the Austin Maestro Montego Owners Club because it's kind of been under the surface in a barn for 10 to 15 years, I believe. It was discovered in a scrapyard. It was very dirty and it was going to be scrapped. I can't believe the wastage that this car might have gone to. That sunroof does not leak. It opens its side and tilt sunroof. We have electric windows that both of them work a bit slow, but you know, we'll put some silicone on them to slow them down, or to make them quicker, I should say. But the paintwork is relatively unblemished. We have the wheel trims that were fitted kind of to LX and the City versions, the City X's. They are hard to get hold of. These have not got any Austin Rover emblem as correct. This side is correct, but if you go on this side, because they're so hard to get hold of, someone has acquired some Austin Rover ones, which would have been a bit earlier, probably mid-80s, before 1987, when the Austin name was dropped, when the Maestro Montego became the poverty spec models essentially in the lineup. If you couldn't afford a Rover, you got an Austin or the Maestro Montego cars as such, because you knew what you got with these. It was a basic car with electronic control of the ignition, which they go a bit wrong, they do. And this one has a particular fault, and you may have seen that in the start of this video where I started it and then it stopped running, and then I started it again and it was fine. That's an auto choke issue, I suspect, but it could also be to do with the electronic ignition control. There are some issues with that. It's a known issue. They never quite run brilliantly with them, but this one actually gets up to temperature absolutely fine. It runs quite nicely. It was just very basic technology before the days of proper ECUs came into its own, but this one is a very rare automatic. So it's a 3-speed ZF box which was fitted to the Mark II Golf automatics, believe it or not. So if you have a gearbox failure on one of these Mark II Golf automatics, they're still around quite a bit from what I see. So I'm sure you could actually fit one of those boxes, no problem at all. It's actually quite a lumpy thing, and quite heavy by the look of it. But this is a G plate, so again, you know, Maestro, no, obviously Austin, it's all gone in the bin. The Austin name consigned to history. And well, we've got some really nice design features. Again, I keep going about these mirrors. I think it's a really unified example of a mirror, where nowadays most cars just have a little tiny tab here, and then you got the mirror, but this was all integrated to make it look like one swooping aerodynamic line, and that's what this car was. They tried to make this car a little bit more aerodynamic. It's still a boxy car, but you can see where they were starting to think about how the air flows by curving panels. There's a curve right here. And then, you know, these arches, I have to say, I think the one feature on a Maestro and a Montego that makes them look quite dated, and made them look quite dated even when they were launched, is these arches. These are very typically what you would expect on a much more older car, 60s, well, probably 70s more or less, not, yeah, pretty much. But it's quite an interesting design feature, and it's now a classic. The ironic thing is, Rob actually took one of his other cars to a local car show that I'm going to show you in a second, and that car got very little attention despite being a very similar age to this. But the Maestro, people were lording over them. So there was a lot of, I think, good feeling, some bad feelings, because I think there were a lot of these that were just shockingly bad body wise, but mechanically quite well proven examples. A well proven car, I should say. I love the fact that you've got this sort of integrated vent, which it's kind of stuck into the actual scuttle. But the scuttle, unlike in an Allegro, I think this is welded in, not bolting. Correct me if I'm wrong here. The last time this car was taxed before recently was 2003. So that's how long this car has been away, hence why the dashboard has not cracked into oblivion. But we have an issue with the central locking. It doesn't work on these two doors, but now we've discovered that that door doesn't work. So the central locking is very intermittent. I think we've got a wiring or fuse issue, some bad connector. It feels like it because this door worked yesterday, but I'll take you into the back. Yeah, this is really sumptuous. I mean, look at this, is beautiful material. It's nice to touch. Yes, it looks a bit old school and a bit sort of pensionerish, even in 1990. It's definitely for the older concerting customer. I think a Rover R8 was designed for the next generation of younger drivers and young execs, whereas these cars were kind of a bit more traditional, the traditional customer who wanted something a little bit more predictable, and that's what you got. I love these headrests. They were fitted to a lot of Range Rovers and a lot of BL products, Austin Rover products down the years. They are very nice and very comfy on your head. The material on the seats is exactly the same as the door cards. Really comfy. And the legroom, I'll tell you, is really good. I remember it being good. Well, I was only a child, but my nan never had a problem sitting behind me when I was in the passenger seat, and my nan would sit behind me on the long journeys to my grandparents. It's quite special, actually. I spent most of my early years at my grandparents'. I was looked after by my grandparents for the first 3 or 4 years of my life, which is why I speak about them quite a lot. And I learnt a lot from my granddad. And pointing underneath the engine bay, which I'm going to show you in a second, is one of them. Sitting in the driving seat and pretending to drive the car was also one. And today I fulfilled that dream. So it is definitely Happy Christmas to me. The interior, wow, yeah, that's a classy touch. I like it. It's nice and square, not circular like on a lot of cars. Square and angular. That kind of describes this car a little bit. Not as curvy as other cars on this time. Certainly not as, you know, curvy as a Sierra, put it that way. Montego versus Sierra, you know, whichever one you want. Do you want a square traditional car, or do you want one that's a bit more bubbling, a bit more modern, a bit more different? I think that's what the Sierra was, in my opinion. But we have a slide and tilt sunroof, which actually works. Oh, trying to wind it back in. There we go. It does work. There we go. Wasn't doing it properly. There we go. Lovely, fantastic. I just love that. There we go. Wind it back in. It's a bit stiff. I don't want to break anything. There we go. Oh, look at that. The whole thing comes open. Yes. And shut that. Don't want any water getting in. Lovely and fantastic. Hook that back in and close the blind. Superb. Obviously we have electric front windows as well. I just want to go over the center console. Lovely thick handbrake there. These, I think these were a carryover from the early days, maybe not. I might be wrong about that one. Got some bubbliness going on with this, but that's all the age for you. Strange enough, and this is a frustration, when it's dark, these are not backlit. There's no bulbs underneath this, so you can't see what blooming gear you're in. Well, you kind of have an idea if you drive automatics a bit like me. Maestro, don't know why they put a Maestro badge on the gear lever. It's a bit overkill, isn't it? It's kind of what people do when they're putting stickers on their cars everywhere. They start putting stickers on everything. But it's quite nice, quite dainty, a bit old school, but you know what you got. It does look like an afterthought, the automatics. It was the manual versions with the usual. We've got a little cubby hole here. We've got electric windows, which work absolutely fine. Bit slow on that window, but as I say, bit of lubrication, it's fine. All speakers work and all that, because we have a Philips radio, which is not quite the original, but it's a period item and it looks absolutely in keeping with the car. One thing I don't like about the centre console, these buttons, in contrast to, let's say, the Sierra or Ruby for a start, because Ruby is 1 year older than this car ridiculously, you know, they're a bit big and clunky. They're functional, but it kind of describes, I think, where the Maestro and Montego were in the range. Functional cars, old school traditional functional cars, and these buttons, I think, tell a long story about that. We've got a lovely glove compartment, and I tell you what, you know, just do that again. It was a little bit more strutted. I think it was a bit slower then, but we've got these little hookies, you know, little boxes to put little receipts and just stash whatever. They're quite useful, actually. I've not seen a glove box like that in a long time. But it's a really deep glove box. It goes really way back. Really nice. I love these mats. Very nice indeed. And we have a proper tea shelf to put my tea, or in my case, because I work on cars quite a lot, my spanners. We've got a clock up there, which is digital. Yeah, I really like that, actually. It's a nice digital clock. We've got the hour, the minute. You know, we can start adjusting it. I think you adjust it with a pin by the look of it. You just stick a pin in there. That's quite awkward. Why don't you just have buttons? It obviously depicts quite a cheap design. Ashtray with a flip up. That's a really nice flip up metal tag there. I love that. What a quaint design. Fuel, temperature, yeah. Really functional, actually. Inside it, just put my wobbly key straight in the lock. You can steal these with a screwdriver. I don't know why I bother using a key, just use a screwdriver. But all your warning lights go out, and we actually could start the car. I'm just going to pull the bonnet so we can actually see underneath the bonnet. Yeah, coin tray under here, fantastic, with a bit of a furry material. Yes, I've just operated the rear wiper. Fantastic. It's very different to have a rear wiper as a button. And then you just got wiper with no wash function at all. That's quite interesting. That's a very old school thing to have the buttons for an actual back wiper. But still really functional, really practical in the boot, by the way. The spare wheel is the original, and it's really dry in the boot, so it's really practical. We've got the partial shelf is unfortunately given away. There's a plastic clip off that strap that's broken. Yeah, if anybody knows anybody who's got a spare partial shelf, I'll point you in the direction of Rob. Even down here, it's just nice and furry. Although the door pockets could be a bit longer, could have gone to about here, but still, that's quite generous and a really good use of space. Let's just see under the engine. In the engine bay. Yeah, a very, very 80s Austin Rover shut. And if I remember how to get the bonnet open. That's it, Andrew. Woohoo! Lovely. Let's slide that in. Lovely. And as you're going to see now, the engine bay has been coated in wax oil. Like the rest of the car, the wax oil has preserved this car incredibly well, and it is everywhere. If it was me, I'd be stripping it and starting again with better protection, because we don't need wax oil. Wax oil has done its job. It did its job back in the day, and it's preserved this car extremely well. Really well. I mean, there's nothing, not in the corners. I've been looking for rust, and There really isn't, apart from a bit of dodgy fiberglassing, I will put it that way. But again, bolt-on wings, you know, that's what made the Maestro for me a little bit more usable, because a lot of cars still had welded wings. Ruby's got welded front wings, but these were bolt-on items. So Austin Rover were doing things perfectly well when they designed this. They obviously had it in mind about, you know, crash damage repairs, you know, swap and bolt on. Obviously learnt from the P6 days, really. The P6 days showed that a car with bolt-on wings was actually a much better solution than rather welded stuff, because it's just not as good. And it's more of a faff when it comes to warranties, of which there are many warranties, not because of accident damage, but as you can imagine, rot on the wings. You know, if you've got a rotten wing, replace it under warranty. Bolt on and off, put a new wing on with paint, job done. It was that easy back in the day. But here we've got a 1.6 R series, which is a development of the S series. The S series was very underdeveloped. I don't know if there are any Maestros left with an S series. There might be one or two lurking away, but that was a dreadful engine. It was underdeveloped. It was ultimately a development, like this engine, of the E series, which was a good engine, but they developed it even further. It's a single overhead cam with this weird arrangement where the camshaft covers are split into two pieces, which is very weird indeed, but it's a very slim engine. That's the first impression I always get of these. Big massive alternator running off quite a thicker fan belt, not as thin as Ruby's. Ruby's is quite thin. I feel that it might jump off if it's not tightened enough, but that is a very simple engine. They have a good reputation. They were a good engine. They leaked oil. They were a bit like the O series. It was kind of a side development to an O series. The O series was very similar, overhead cam. That engine had a few more issues, but the S series is a very tried and tested unit. And we have an SU carburettor at the back with I love this. Just even in 1990 they removed the Austin badge, but they still had symbols of the past everywhere. And the other one, if we come over here, is the programmed ignition control, made in the UK. Yeah, with the Austin Rover badge. This box is what is responsible for a lot of Maestros potentially going to the scrapyard. Obviously rust was the first one. The second one was dodgy ECUs where they never quite ran correctly, lumpy or cutting out or non-starting issues. This one, we think it's an automatic choke issue on the first startup, but the second time you start, it starts. So there's something going on that isn't quite right, and I'm looking at that, and I've pointed Rob to try and get a second-hand one just to have it as a spare. Every Maestro owner should have a spare one of them at all costs, because yeah, these were the days where some basic ignition control was needed, some basic programming. That is a very basic form of an ECU, but it's not quite an ECU, not in my opinion. As most cars have, we've got twin washers. Yeah, very nice indeed, as per common. Coil on the back that leads to the distributor, which is obviously driven by the camshaft, as typical, you know, same system that I've got on Ruby, just in a different format. And I tell you what, this engine oil, I think it's been changed recently, but I'll just have a little peek inside. Yes, I can see camshaft, and I can smell oil, but a hint of petrol, which is kind of what you actually normally smell on cars this age. We have a leak from that pipe down there, which may have stopped. It's a pipe from the expansion tank, which goes to this pipe that goes in the bottom of the radiator. I don't know if the radiators are unique to the automatics, but quite interestingly, I don't know if there's a separate gearbox oil cooler at the front. I might be mistaken, but I can't see any bite work. And that is the big massive lump of ZF 3-speed automatic gearbox with its green dipstick there, which is still intact, which is really good because most of them are not. It's a really big lump down there. In fact, I think I'll just shove you underneath, and yes, it is quite a big lump, that, isn't it? It's quite heavy when you couple it to the engine, but that's really nice. It's got a couple of rocker cover leaks that's dripping all the way down, but they'll be done. You know, the plugs are very accessible, very nice to see. We do have an automatic choke system on the carburettor, which is possibly that fault, but we don't know. Just trial now, but it does start and it runs very nicely, and it gets up to temperature and it incrementally lowers the idle, which is exactly what's supposed to happen. I prefer a manual choke. I think automatic chokes were just dreadful, weren't they? They never worked well. The early systems used a bimetallic strip. I think this might do something similar, but the early versions have a bimetallic strip in the exhaust. When the exhaust closes, the idle comes down. It changes quite a few different things. We've got a new pump. I think the last owner fitted a new mechanical pump, but this for me as a child, I'm literally here pointing to this bit to the engine. Grandad, what's this? What's this? What's this? That's my childhood. I just loved looking in an engine bay, and it was definitely a 1.6 and not a 1.3A series because of one particular thing that stands out. I'm not sure why. It's this airbox. This airbox was very similar. I think it's the same one fitted to SD1 23 and 2600s, with this flappy sort of fan design on the top. It's a fancy cover. That's very distinctive. And I was thinking, is that what I saw as a kid? I was trying to work out whether it was a 1.3 or 1.6 because you just don't notice as a child, but it was definitely a 1.6. So I'm pleased to know that I think this car is it's the twin of my childhood. So you might be seeing this on the channel a little bit more, but I'm going to end this here by just turning the key. Now it's relatively on the cold side, so let's see if it starts first time. See, it struggles there, and it's okay. It struggled a bit. That's what it does on a cold start. Absolutely love it. I'm going to leave this here because I've spoken about this car for too long, but it's a very special car to me, and that's why I've gone overboard in this video with this car. It's what floats your boat. That Maestro badge will be moved to the correct side. I know it's not in the right place. Somebody put it there when they resprayed it in the wrong place. It's going to go back there. That automatic badge is off an earlier Mark 1 Maestro before the facelift. It will probably stay on the car, but it's probably going to go there. And look, Rob has got an LX badge to go there, so it'll be automatic LX Maestro. A little bit better. There you go. Next car.